Beneath the chilly moonlight of Windsor, King Charles gathers the royal family to announce a bombshell. He will step down, paving the way for an unprecedented overhaul. William faces the weight of the throne, Harry grapples with isolation, and Kate struggles to keep the family from falling apart. Secrets clashes and old wounds erupt, pushing them to the edge of power and kinship. Can the royals survive this crisis, or will it all collapse? A small chance for hope remains, but who will seize it? The Windsor night sky was cloaked in a misty haze, its icy chill seeping into the ancient stones of the castle. Pale moonlight slipped through towering windows, casting faint glows along the endless corridor, where Charles's footsteps echoed sharply. He paused before an intricately carved oak door, his gaunt hand hesitating on the brass handle. Beyond it lay a secluded room, where he had summoned the closest members of the royal family. This was no warm gathering. It was a grave summons, heavy with the weight of an impending verdict. Charles took a deep breath, trying to dispel the heaviness in his chest. He had prepared for this moment for months, yet, as it arrived, his heart raced. He knew what was about to unfold would change everything, not just the throne, but the fragile family ties already fraying at the edges. Inside, flickering candlelight danced on ancient silver holders, illuminating portraits of stern ancestors lining the walls. Their gazes seemed to watch a silent reminder of the royal bloodline's burdens. But Charles ignored them. His eyes swept over the red velvet chairs where his family was assembling. The air was taut like a string, ready to snap. William sat near the fireplace, hands clasped tightly, his gaze pensive. Dressed in a dark suit, his polished appearance couldn't hide the exhaustion etched on his face. Kate sat beside him, hands resting lightly on her knees, her usual radiant smile reduced to a faint line. Princess Anne, resolute as ever, leaned against the window frame, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Then the door creaked open again, and Harry stepped in. He wore a simple sweater, his hair disheveled from a long flight. Meghan was conspicuously absent. Her absence felt like an invisible void, causing every eye in the room to pause for a moment. Harry sensed it but merely nodded, choosing a chair in the far corner and sitting down, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside, where shadows swallowed everything. Charles stood, hands clasped behind his back. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice low but resonant. "I know this isn't an ideal time, but some matters can't wait." William's brow furrowed, his eyes probing his father. Kate's grip tightened, unease rising within her. Harry didn't look at anyone, but his hand clutched the chair's armrest as if holding back something. Only Anne remained still, her face a stone mask betraying no emotion. Charles cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "Our family has faced many trials, but never have I felt the throne so fragile as now." He paused, weighing each word. "And so I need you all here to decide our future together." His words landed like a stone in a still lake, sending ripples through the room. William looked up, his eyes sharp. "What decision, father?" His voice was calm, but the tension beneath was palpable. Charles didn't answer immediately. He stepped to the table where a stack of documents sat neatly. Those thin pages carried the weight of an entire dynasty. "Tonight," he said, "we'll discuss how to save this family and the throne." No one spoke. The candles flickered, casting shadows on troubled faces. In that moment, beneath the gilded veneer of power, they were no different from any family teetering on the brink of collapse. But no one knew if they could find a half-open door to mend their bonds, or if all that remained was the ashes of old dreams. The room fell silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace as Charles cleared his throat, about to speak. But he hesitated, his gaze shifting to Anne. "Anne," he said, his voice low, but waited. "You tell them. I think you'll explain it more clearly." All eyes turned to Princess Anne. She stood by the window, her tall, lean silhouette framed against the crimson velvet curtains. Her navy suit exuded authority, but her piercing eyes held something deeper, not anger, but a quiet concern. Anne stepped to the center of the room, her low-heeled shoes tapping evenly on the wooden floor. She needed no notes, no preparation. Her words, like her character, were direct and unyielding. "Charles has made his decision." Anne began, her voice clear, slicing through the tense air like a blade. "The king will step down early, not in years but in months." A sharp exhale broke the silence, though no one could tell from whom. William froze, his clasped hands trembling slightly. Kate bit her lip, her eyes darting to her husband, trying to gauge his reaction. Harry, in his far corner, looked up, eyes wide, but said nothing. Only the fireplace's steady crackle marked the passing seconds like a countdown. Anne pressed on. "This isn't just about passing the throne," she said, her gaze sweeping over each person, ensuring no one looked away. "It's a complete overhaul. The monarchy will be streamlined, fewer members, lower costs. Finances will be fully transparent. And most importantly," she paused, drawing a deep breath, "we'll begin returning colonial assets taken long ago. This isn't an empty promise. Plans are drafted and will act as soon as Charles steps back." Her words hit like a cold gust. William's brow furrowed, his eyes shifting from Anne to Charles. "Streamline the monarchy?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "What does that mean, cutting out who and returning colonial assets?" "What does that mean for us?" Anne met William's gaze unflinchingly. "It means we must change William. The monarchy can't continue as it is, a clunky machine criticized for being out of touch. If we don't reform ourselves, the public will do it for us. And then there'll be no throne left to fight over." Harry let out a soft, bitter chuckle, almost mocking. "Reform," he said, speaking for the first time since entering. "Are you talking about polishing the surface to save face, or actually fixing what's broken inside?" His eyes were icy, fixed on Anne, though everyone knew his words targeted the whole family. Anne didn't respond immediately. She crossed her arms, her gaze steady, but with a hint of challenge. "Harry," she said evenly, "if you think this is just a PR game, you've missed the point. This is about survival, not just for the throne, but for all of us." Kate, silent until now, gently touched William's arm as if to ease the tension. "Anne," she said, her voice soft but firm, "we all understand how important this is. But such big changes so quickly, are they feasible? And the public, how will they react?" Anne turned to Kate, her expression softening slightly, as if she appreciated her calm. "Kate, I won't pretend it'll be easy. The public will have opinions as always. But if we don't act, they won't just talk, they'll demand we end it all. And I don't want to leave a shattered monarchy for Charlotte or Louis's generation." The mention of her children made Kate pause. She lowered her head, her hands tightening. William glanced at his father, his eyes questioning. "Is this really your plan, or just Anne's?" But Charles remained silent, his face a stoic mask revealing nothing. Beneath her tough exterior, Anne wasn't as detached as she appeared. As her eyes scanned the room, she saw cracks not just in the monarchy, but in her own family. William burdened by the future throne, Kate holding everything together while her heart bled, Harry so distant he seemed a ghost in his own home, and her brother Charles carrying the pain of a father unable to mend his family. She returned to her spot, her gaze fixed on the darkness outside. "I know you have questions," she said, her voice softer, almost gentle. "And I don't promise all the answers. But tonight we must agree on one thing. If we don't stand together, we'll lose everything." The Windsor meeting room sank into a stifling silence after Princess Anne's declaration. Candlelight flickered, casting shadows on strained faces, each person trapped in their own thoughts. Anne's words about the king's abdication, the radical overhaul, hung in the air, sharp as a blade cutting into old wounds this family had long buried. William sat motionless, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. His usually composed princely demeanor was marred by tense lines on his face. He looked at his father Charles, seeking an explanation, a sign that this was just a rough draft. But Charles stayed quiet, his eyes fixed on the documents before him, as if they could shield him from the storm brewing. Harry in the far corner leaned back, his eyes glinting with a mix of shock and bitterness. He avoided everyone's gaze, staring into the fireplace's flames, as if they held the story of his life. Anne's bold words didn't surprise him as much as the silence of the others. He was used to being sidelined, but this moment's isolation cut deeper than ever. Kate beside William maintained a calm facade. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, but her fingers trembled, betraying her unease. She felt the weight of Anne's words, not just for the monarchy, but for her own small family. She glanced at William, her eyes full of worry, but he seemed lost in his own world, a world she knew even as his wife she could barely reach. "So that's it," William finally said, his voice low and deliberate, as if holding back a tide of emotion. "Father plans to abandon the throne, and we're supposed to, tear down everything this family has built, just to appease the crowd?" He turned to Anne, his eyes cutting like a knife. "Do you really believe this will save us, or just throw us into another crisis?" Anne opened her mouth to reply, but Harry cut in, his voice low but sharp. "Oh, William, don't act like you care about this family." He said the word family laced with sarcasm. "You're just worried about your precious throne, aren't you? Scared it won't be intact when it's your turn." Harry's words were like lightning, shattering the room's fragile calm. William whipped around to face his brother, his eyes blazing with rare anger. "You dare say that?" he snapped. "You who turned your back on everything, walked away, and left us to clean up your mess. What right do you have to judge?" Harry let out a dry, joyless laugh. "Judge, I'm just stating the truth. You've always been the favorite, William. From day one, everything revolved around you, the heir, the perfect one. Me, I was just the spare, constantly reminded I wasn't good enough." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, landing on Charles. "And Father, you never really saw me, did you?" Charles stiffened, his hands gripping the table's edge. "Harry," he said, his voice hoarse, "you know that's not true." But the words lacked conviction, as if he doubted them himself. The room seemed to shrink, leaving only the three men, Charles, William, and Harry, and the old wounds they tried to bury. Childhood memories flooded back, vivid as yesterday. William recalled days when his father took him to learn royal protocols while Harry was left with the staff. Harry remembered trying to make his father smile, only to receive a curt nod. And Charles? He remembered Diana's eyes pleading with him to love both sons equally, a plea he'd failed to fulfill. Kate, unable to bear the suffocating tension, stood gently. "Enough," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We're not here to drag up the past. We need to talk about the future." She looked at Harry, then William, her eyes pleading. "Please stop, for everyone's sake." But her words couldn't quench the fire. William shot to his feet, his chair scraping the wooden floor with a shrill screech. "The future," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "The future my brother wants is to destroy everything we've preserved. He doesn't care, Kate. He never did." Harry stood too, the brothers facing each other, mere feet apart, but separated by an ocean. "You're wrong," Harry said, his voice low but fierce. I care. I care about Mum, about what she believed in. But you and Father, you've turned this into a power game, and I want no part of it." His words hit like a punch, making William step back. Charles bowed his head, his hands shaking. Anne, the only one still standing, calmly finally spoke. "Enough," she said, her voice cold as steel. "You want to fight, fine, but not now, not here. We have bigger things to address." She stepped forward, placing a hand on Charles's shoulder, as if lending him strength. "Brother," she said, tell them. Tell them what you told me." Charles looked up, his eyes weary but resolute. "I don't want this throne to be a burden to you," he said. "But if we don't change, it will crush us all. I saw it happen. With your mother." Mentioning Diana plunged the room back into silence. Her name was like a curse, a reminder of irreparable losses and mistakes. William sank into his chair, his face pale. Harry turned away, but no one missed the silent tear rolling down his cheek. The eyes in the room, whether sharp or pained, shared one thing: fear. fear that the throne for which they'd sacrificed so much might ultimately destroy them. In that flickering candlelight, the royal family was no different from ordinary people trapped in the old cracks of their past, unsure how to move forward. The meeting in Windsor's secluded room ended in suffocating silence. The sharp words between William and Harry Ann's cold proclamation and Charles's weary gaze lingered like echoes even as the heavy oak door closed. Kate stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the cold stone floor, each step pulling her from the storm she'd just endured, but drawing her closer to another within her own heart. She pushed open the door to her private bedroom, the familiar space greeting her with quiet. She slipped off her coat, hanging it mechanically, then sank into an armchair by the window. Outside, Windsor's darkness enveloped everything, with only a few distant lights flickering like lost stars. Kate bowed her head, her hands clenching her knees. In this moment, with no eyes watching, no cameras flashing, she let her perfect mask fall. The emotions she'd suppressed during the meeting, fear, helplessness, pain, surged like a breaking wave. She thought of William, the husband she loved more than life. In the meeting, he tried to stay strong, but Kate saw the cracks, red-rimmed eyes, trembling hands when Diana was mentioned. She knew he was torn not just by Charles's plan, but by Harry's words, which struck like daggers. William had always carried the throne's weight, the need to be a perfect king, but tonight he looked like a man on the verge of breaking. That terrified Kate. If William fell, what would she do? How could she keep their little family, George, Charlotte, Louis, steady in this storm? Then she thought of Harry, the brother-in-law who once made her laugh with silly jokes, a close friend in her early royal days. She remembered afternoons at Kensington when William and Harry sat around the kitchen table sharing trivial stories and simple dreams. Now Harry was a stranger. His eyes in the meeting full of bitterness and hurt pierced her heart. She wanted to reach out, pull him back, tell him she still saw him as family. But she knew the distance between them wasn't just the ocean separating England and California. It was wounds too deep, too tangled to heal. Kate closed her eyes, a silent tear rolling down her cheek. She thought of her roles, wife, mother, public royal figure. The world saw her as a symbol of perfection, of strength. But tonight she felt small, fragile, like a cracked porcelain vase, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. She had to keep the family's image intact, smile for the cameras, teach her children duty and compassion. But how, when she was fighting to keep her own heart whole? She stood, walked to the window, and gazed into the dark. She thought of Charles, his decision, and Anne's words. The monarchy had to change, but at what cost could they salvage any sense of family from the ashes of power she didn't know? But in this moment, alone with the darkness, Kate vowed to fight not for the throne, but for those she loved. Even if it was just a half-open door, she'd find a way to let light in. She took a deep breath, wiped the tear from her cheek, and stood tall. Tomorrow she'd be Catherine, Princess of Wales, with a perfect smile and steady gaze. But tonight she was just Kate, a woman trying to hold her heart together amid a fracturing family. Harry sat silently in the corner of Windsor's secluded meeting room, his somber gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window. The harsh words exchanged, William's, Anne's, his own, still echoed, deepening his sense of isolation. This room, this family, had once been his entire world. Now he felt like an exile cast aside by cold glances and unspoken wounds. He closed his eyes and his mother Diana appeared vividly. Warm Kensington afternoons, her arms around him, whispering that he was strong enough to be himself. "You don't have to be like anyone else, Harry," she'd said, her smile bright as sunlight. Diana was the only one who truly understood him, who saw the rebellious yet loving heart within. But she was gone, leaving him adrift in a family where he no longer belonged. Harry clenched his fists, pain surging. He'd chosen his path, leaving the monarchy, speaking out against injustices he saw, but now he saw the cost. His rebellion, though heartfelt, had torn the last threads tying him to William, to Charles, to the family. In the meeting, their eyes held not just anger but distance, as if he were a stranger. He stood, leaving the room without looking back. Under Windsor's pale moonlight, Harry felt like a shadow wandering in his ancestors' home. He wanted to return to heal, but was there still a half-open door for him? In the dimly lit study of Windsor Castle, a single desk lamp cast a faint golden glow on the legal documents before Charles. The steady tick of a pendulum clock marked the final moments of his reign. Charles sat, his gaunt hands gripping a pen, his eyes heavy but resolute. Beside him, Princess Anne stood quietly, arms crossed, her sharp gaze softening as she watched her brother. The recent meeting with William and Harry's fiery clash, Kate's anxious eyes haunted Charles. But he refused to waver. He took a deep breath and signed each page, each stroke, transferring power, easing a burden. This wasn't just preparation for his exit. It was his last hope to shape a leaner, transparent, less painful monarchy. Anne watched, her heart heavy. She knew how hard this was, not just as a king, but as a father. As Charles signed the final page, she stepped forward, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Charles," she said, her voice low but warm, "you've done what's right. Not everyone has the courage to change like this." Charles leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, as if to banish the exhaustion pressing down. "Anne," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I'm not afraid to leave the throne, but I'm terrified. I've failed William and Harry." He opened his eyes, staring at the documents, his gaze lost, searching for something long gone. Anne sat across from him, her eyes firm, yet compassionate. "Brother, they're not the boys we once knew. William carries your burden, and Harry, he has Diana's heart. They're angry lost, but they're still your sons. You've given them a chance to fix this, not just the monarchy, but our family." Charles shook his head, a sad smile flickering. "I let it go too far, Anne. I should have kept them close, not let these gaps widen." He looked out the window, where Windsor's darkness swallowed all. "I wanted to be a good king, but as a father, I'm not sure I've succeeded." Anne squeezed his hand, her voice resolute. "Charles, don't torment yourself. William will learn to lead, even if he's scared now. And Harry, no matter how far he goes, is still our blood. You've opened a new path, and that's what matters. Time will handle the rest." Charles looked at his sister, his eyes misty. "You've always been strong, Anne," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Anne smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "You're my brother, Charles. I'm always here." She stood, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Believe in your sons, and believe in yourself. This family isn't broken yet." Charles nodded, though his heart remained heavy. He glanced at the signed documents, then at Anne, his steadfast sister. In the dim light, a faint spark of hope flickered, not for the throne, but for the family ties he hoped one day could be mended. Under the pale sunlight of a London morning, Charles stepped onto the balcony of Buckingham Palace, where a curious and anxious crowd had gathered. Big Ben's chimes echoed, marking a historic moment. Charles, in a navy suit, stood tall, but his hands gripped the railing, tightly clinging to his remaining strength. Beside him, William stood with a calm face, but his eyes were heavy, hiding emotions only those closest to him could see. The world watched, from phones raised in the crowd to giant screens in the square. Charles cleared his throat, his voice ringing through the microphone, steady but clear, cutting through the chilly air. Today, he began, "I stand here not just as a king, but as a father, a man with a duty to our nation and history. I have decided to step down from the throne earlier than planned to pave the way for a new monarchy, one that is streamlined, transparent, and closer to the people." The crowd murmured, a few scattered claps rising, but most stood silent, processing the weight of his words. William remained still, his eyes on the crowd, but seeing nothing. Inside, a storm of emotions churned: fear of the throne's burden, pain from his clash with Harry, and a faint pride for his father, who dared to do what few kings would. He clenched his fists, maintaining his composed facade, but his heart felt squeezed. Thousands of miles away, in a quiet California room, Harry sat alone before a TV screen. The screen's light highlighted his red-rimmed eyes and tense features. He'd known this day was coming, from Anne's words at the meeting, from his father's look when they parted. But hearing Charles's voice through the speakers, Harry felt a sharp pang in his chest. Pain for the years they'd lost, for unspoken words, for the distance he'd created. Yet mixed with it was a faint pride that his father, however late, chose a path his mother Diana might have supported. On the screen, Charles continued, his voice softening. "I don't promise the road ahead will be easy, but I believe that with my son William's leadership and your support, the monarchy will find the strength to renew." He turned to William, placing a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture laden with meaning. William nodded slightly, but his eyes remained heavy, as if carrying the world. In California, Harry turned off the TV, the screen going black. He stood stepping onto the balcony where Montecito's warm sunlight contrasted with London's chill. He gazed at the horizon, his heart torn between pain and hope. He thought of his mother, her words about courage and change. "Mum would be proud of you, Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. But thinking of William, of the family, he'd left a deep sadness hit. Did he still have a place in this new story? At Buckingham, Charles finished his speech, applause rising, but he didn't smile. He turned back inside William, following the two entering the palace's quiet halls. The crowd outside buzzed, but in this moment it was just father and son, and the invisible cracks between them. Charles looked at his son, wanting to say something, but only nodded. William nodded back, his eyes saying, "I'll try, father." That day the world saw a king change history. But only those involved, Charles, William, Harry, knew the true cost of that change. Beneath the golden veneer of power, family bonds are as fragile as any. Some cracks never heal, but with sincerity there's still a chance, even if it's just a half-open door. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to explore more emotional journeys.